What if you could add 10 healthy years to your life and feel stronger, sharper, and more alive than you do right now? What if someone had the data to prove it and the stories to make you believe it? Today's guest has spent a lifetime rewriting the rules of aging and fitness, and his journey will challenge everything you thought you knew about health. Stay tuned. This conversation might change the way you live. Next on the podcast, let's do this.
Welcome to the No Sitting on the Sideline Dad podcast, a podcast about a journey of discovery and conversations about not sitting on the sideline of life. Let's get involved. Here's host Joe Foley.
Welcome back to the No Sitting on the Sideline Dad podcast. Today's conversation with a true legend in preventive medicine, Dr. Kenneth Cooper. He's the physician who coined the word aerobics. He's a father of aerobics. And sparked the worldwide fitness revolution that changed how doctors and athletes and everyday people think about health. At 95, Dr. Cooper is still proving that exercise is medicine, sharing science behind and adding not just years to your life, but life to your years. From training NASA astronauts to helping Brazil win the World Cup, his story, his research are packed with practical steps anyone can start using right now. Yes, right now. So let's dive into the conversation with Dr. Kenneth Cooper. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Cooper.
Thank you.
Thank you much for being here. I really do appreciate it. And you have an interesting background, and you published a book about aerobics in 1968. That was a groundbreaking thing. Can you tell me more about it? 'Cause I think that's really fascinating.
Back in those days, the subject of exercise in medicine was just not discussed. It was contraindicated. For example, when I was in high school and college, I ran track, played basketball. In high school, I made all-state in basketball. Oklahoma City is where I was born and raised. And won the state championship with a mile run, almost set a new state record. That prompted me to get a scholarship on track in Oklahoma. But throughout this time, my father, practicing dentist in Oklahoma City, did not embrace my concept of exercise. He thought, as was popular back in those days, exercising too much can cause the heart to be damaged. The heart become muscular, and then as you stop exercising, you get older, it converts into fat, and you die early. He was so convinced. His son never saw me run an event, high school or college, never saw me play basketball. My brother did. That was sad because back in those days, even in medical school, we were taught that exercising too much can be dangerous. We didn't have echocardiograms back in those days. All you would see was a chest x-ray in an athlete and a large silhouette of his heart. Thought that was muscle, but in reality, that wasn't just muscle. That was the dilatation of the heart. The enlargement of the heart, the muscle, it pumps blood from the heart. As a result, that would go up because that ejection fraction, so it's a conservation of energy. So endurance athletes have a reduction in their resting heart rate. It's simply, as I said, a conservation of energy. And that's why they tend to live longer. Mm-hmm. So I just had my ejection fraction just last week. It should be about 50. My advanced stage, my ejection fraction is 63. So I have no signs of any congestive heart failure. And I'm on my 95th year now. And so tragic thing, we didn't know this in medical school, that exercise is medicine. We tried to prove this in my new book. And this is The Power of Prevention. That's not the book. My new book is Growing Healthy as You Grow Older. But the power of prevention shows that you can do things on your own. They can prolong your life, as you already said, extend life by at least 10 years. We've proven that in our studies. Because the good Lord meant for us to be active. And no drug can replicate the benefits of an active lifestyle. But keep in mind, too, the way to solve problems is to empower the people, not empower the government. So you can't rely upon the government. You can't rely upon the insurance company. You can't rely upon your physician unless he or she is trained in either preventive medicine or lifestyle medicine. So again, this is revolutionary. It's what I'm doing. In those early days, I was criticized viciously. Streets going to be full of dead joggers as people followed Cooper's aerobics program. Cooper killed more than Hitler did in World War II, following his program. That didn't happen because in 1968, we had less than 150 joggers. By 1984, we had 34 million joggers. And
Oh, wow.
heart disease went down, not up. I ran my first Boston Marathon back in 1962. I came in 101st, the Boston Marathon. Sounds fantastic. Only 150 could run it back in those days. That wasn't so dramatic. And now they have 15 to 20,000 run the marathon. So it's been a dramatic change since 1968. We published the book Aerobics.
Well, it's interesting too. I remember watching old videos of doctors and stuff. They would be smoking in the waiting room or smoking while they're talking to you too. So I know medicine's changed over time.
Yes, in fact, when I was in medical school, I would see that we as medical students would see titles in journals and magazines that my physician smokes Camels. That's hard to believe. I graduated in 1956. Surgeon General report didn't come out. Smoking your health in 1964. I had an epiphany in my life, though, at age 29 that changed my life. I've been an athlete, as I mentioned, in high school and college with a running weight of 155 to 160, 165 to 168. That was my athletic weight. But when I got into medical school, I learned a very important point. Obesity is the most common manifestation of stress. Stress in medical school. Trying to make good grades, trying to stay awake at night, just study. And I did that, but I steadily gained weight. I stopped exercise because, quote, I didn't have time to exercise. I've heard that excuse many, many times. So I gained weight, Brett. My internship started in Seattle, a year there, and by the time I finished my internship, I weighed 204 pounds. I grew up from 160 to 204. In that overweight, hypertense, pre-diabetic condition, I decided to go water skiing again for the first so many years. And that was at 29 years of age. About halfway through that water skiing experience, slalom course, I had onset of chest pain. Heart started racing in my chest. They got me over the side. Until I go over the side over to the beach, my heart rate came back to normal. The pain disappeared. I was still in the Air Force. And the next day, I was worked up at the School of Aerospace Medicine in San Antonio since I was still in the Air Force. Only thing wrong with you, Doc, you're out of shape. Out of shape. 29 years of age. I couldn't believe that. I planned on leaving my internship in Seattle and going to Portland, Oregon, and do a residency in ophthalmology. But then when I lost that weight within 6 months for my first marathon a year later, I thought this is a field of medicine been sadly ignored. Because I was taught in medical school that preventive medicine is a Cinderella of the medical space because there's no profit in health. I believe that too. You could do that. So again, I made that dramatic change and I changed the world with the publication of my 20th book and tried to Cooperize the world. Because we know that if people get Cooperized, you've already mentioned, we've proven this in a long-term study of 100,000 patients. They came to our clinic and they at least 20 times over a 45-year period. And we got their death certificates and found that they were squaring off the curve, living long, healthy lives of fullest and dying in a short period of time. They were condensing the time of senility and senescence to a short period of maybe prior to death. But we're doing this at an advanced age. The average American is dying around the life expectancy of American people, both men and women, is about 78, 79. But our women were dying at 94.4 years of age. Our men were dying 86.5 years of age. That's 88.6 for our men and women, which is clearly 10 years lower than the national average. So we have data that is too impressive now to be ignored.
I had a quick question though, but you mentioned something before. I want to go back 1 minute. Is about the stress, you gain weight because of stress. What do you mean by that?
Gain weight because you eat to keep awake at night. That's what you just, and if you've been to medical school, you work until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And even during internship, they had a 24-hour bar, food service that you get for keep you awake because you're on internship. You might start to work on Saturday morning, and you have to go to bed until Monday. That kind of thing, and they work in a public hospital. And so they had food service for us. And so you largely just keep awake, just be able to take care of those patients. And that's a mistake. Now they've changed that. But again, obesity is the most common manifestation of stress. And obesity is rampant in America today. It's rampant in the world today. In fact, we're at the top of the list as far as people who are obese in America. But obesity control is one of the first 8 things we recommend being Cooperized. And that is to know what your body weight should be and work for that goal, because you can't be healthy and be obese. Let's talk about that for just a minute, because there's some discussion about how do you determine your ideal weight. The way most people do it now, they go to the computer and type in their height and their weight. That's called the body mass index. 18 to 25 is normal. 25 to 30 is overweight. 30 to 35 is obese. About 35 is morbidly obese. But one thing we miss with that considers a body as a cylinder, like a tube. But people don't have bodies shaped that way. They're endomorphs, and they have a big belly, a pot belly, and that's called visceral fat. And that's the fat that's associated with all sorts of medical problems, heart attacks and stroke. But what you need to do is get your body mass index, but get the circumference of your waist, standing position. Get a tape measure and measure through your navel what is the circumference of your waist. And it should be 1/2 your height in inches. So if you're 6 foot in height, that's 72 inches. Your waist should be no more than 36 inches. Those two combinations, get your body mass index and get the circumference of your waist, is the best way you can determine your ideal weight.
I have a cool question about that too. Is there one standard for everybody, or the same person is 5'10", but his body, like his bones or something, that's bigger, that he could be like not be change it or something like that?
That's a common excuse. I have big bones. Majority of people don't have big bones. Well, we look from a more sophisticated standpoint, of course, this medical environment. For years, we had underwater weighing. We had underwater displacement technique. Now we use what's called DEXA. It's electronic technology. It shows you exactly how much body is your fat and how much is lean. That's the ideal thing. Because people do think I had big bones. I can tolerate more weight. Maybe people of color, maybe have larger bones than they can. But again, I know one way we resolved that in the military, where I spent some 13 years with these basic airmen I worked with, and they couldn't meet the standards as far as the body mass index. And so I told the troops, and I told the parents, and told the gentlemen, see how far they can run in 12 minutes. That's the very famous Cooper says from the original book, Aerobics. You run 1.5 miles in 12 minutes. That has to be muscle, not fat, because you can be misled with the body mass index. If you're muscular, but you'll find out that your waist circumference won't be large if you're muscular.
That's definitely interesting too. And what are some big myths about exercising and aging?
Exercising in the evening.
No, exercise and aging.
Exercising
and aging.
Aging. It's physical fitness. Fitness is a journey, not a destination. You got to keep it up the rest of your life. Because the older you are, the longer it takes to get into shape and the faster you lose it. It's just reversed during your youth. You get into shape rapidly and you keep it for a long time. But we want to change some of those myths of aging. And there are some 12 of them. I mentioned in one of my books. We'll talk about it on a lake as we're going to be doing here in the near future. Like you can't build up muscle mass past 50 years of age. We know past 50 years of age you get sarcopenia. And that's when your muscle mass starts to deteriorate. All that can be changed because we don't wear out, we rust out. Keep that in mind.
Oh,
people, even at my advanced stage, they're saying, even at my advanced stage, I said in my 95th year, I'm now growing new muscle mass because I had an injury. I broke my leg snow skiing back in 2021. Well, wiped out my 40 years of running at 38,000 miles, but it didn't stop my exercise. I just transitioned to recumbent cycling. I do that regularly. But now I'm going through muscle activation training with a personal trainer. And I'm finding out I've been build up this quadricep muscle. That's my right leg. And I have an imbalance of the two muscles, my right leg and my left leg. So I'm not a candidate for having a total replacement surgery, but I have a tendency to fall because I'm imbalanced there. And praise the Lord, I've seen that right muscle now increase in size and strength. I'll be getting over that in my 95th year. So don't tell me you can't build up muscle mass even at my advanced stage.
Well, is it important though to have strength training after 50 though? Is it really important?
It's what now?
Strength training after like a certain age?
Yes. That's a very good point because we know that in your 30s, 80% should be aerobic and then 20% should be musculoskeletal. You don't need to worry about that then. In your 40s, it's 70 and 30s. In your 50s, it's 60 and 40. And once you get an advanced age, it'll be roughly 55, 45 because you got to compensate for that muscle mass you're losing because of sarcopenia as you get older. You're exactly right. And that's why I have my recumbent cycling for 30 minutes and I have 10 minutes of circuit weight training when I work out routinely. I'm working out an hour twice a week with the personal trainer though, and building up the muscle mass is my baby, as I said in my late. But yes, you need to combine both to get older. You want to be totally fit, not just aerobically fit.
Well, I notice that sometimes, especially the elderly people in my family, that my son's grandparents, and I notice the father who's always active and exercising, and the mother isn't, and I can see the less mobility in her because she's getting more like stiff movement.
That's exactly right. Because your muscles start creaking on you, you start rushing, and as I said earlier, it's just as important for my wife to exercise as for me. My wife is 90 years of age, and she's working out this morning. So you can't give it up. You got to keep it up. I've had so many people tell me, I wish I'd have known so many years ago, how much better I could feel. That's the primary reason people keep exercising, not to prolong their lives or reduce the deaths of heart attacks or strokes, whatever it may be. It's because when I exercise, doc, I feel good. We've done scientific studies on that. Among the 700 articles we publish in peer-reviewed journals, trying to bridge the gap between faddism and scientific legitimacy, exercise the practice of medicine. One of the most famous ones, we were able to show that people who are physically fit are less depressed. They're less of a hypochondriac, improved self-image, much more positive attitude towards life. They have a different attitude towards life. And that's so extremely important because that's why I want to feel the way I'm feeling now the rest of my years, how many more years I have.
Well, definitely too, it's interesting too. I wonder if you can explain the 8 steps to getting Cooperized.
Number one, as I said, if I discuss this, is proper weight. Number 2 is adequate diet, a good diet. I try to summarize that quickly by saying 5 is fine, 9 is survive. Number of servings and fruits and vegetables should be on a daily basis. The average American, 3.1. The average American teenager, 1.6. Along with that, I recommend at least vitamin D. Vitamin D is associated with many things. When deficient, unless you get enough exposure to sun, you're going to be deficient in vitamin D. Well, we found during the COVID epidemic that people deficient in vitamin D were more likely to be hospitalized and die. That's why I've been taking 7,000 units of vitamin D for a long time. Yes, I had, in my advanced stage, I had 2 episodes of Omicron virus, but I was only quarantined for 5 days. I had a headache. I would have died because my vitamin D level is 70 instead of being 25 to 30 days to most people. It blocks that damage to the virus that causes the pneumonia that causes people to die from COVID-19. And remember that over 65 is a major risk factor and COVID-19 deaths. And people are overweight. Vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, so they can't utilize the vitamin D. On down the list, the next is very important. That's you must get at least 30 minutes of exercise, collective or sustained, most days per week. That amounts to 150 minutes of exercise per week. And I easily get that. And there are many studies, just recently one was published on how to delay the onset of dementia. And one thing to do that was to change your lifestyle. You can prevent Alzheimer's dementia. I mentioned this extensively in my new book. So we can prevent that disease. So it's very important to control your diet and you get your vitamin supplementation and to get 30 minutes of exercise, selective versus safe. Next on the list is eliminate tobacco. There's nothing you can say good about any types of tobacco, whether it's dipping stuff or whether it's smoking, cigars, whatever it may be. Even inhaled side stream smoke can be dangerous. You need to avoid that. But then next on that list, you got it controlled. I prefer you eliminate your alcohol. You say, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I never have. But why is this so important? We know for years that alcohol is associated with cirrhosis of the liver. It's associated with automobile accidents, associated with lots of things. Do you know it's associated now with cancer? And several different cancers are related to alcohol. That includes beer, wine, and hard liquor. And it starts in the mouth, goes to the throat, it goes to the esophagus, and then to the colon, or to the colon, yes. And then estimate 30,000 women will die this year because of getting breast cancer from the consumption of alcohol. So important. Next on that list, very important, is control stress. I control stress by the end of, I'm still working at least 40 hours a week, but at the end of my 8-hour day, I go work out to control the stress so I can sleep at night. And we need 7 hours of sleep at night. I easily get that. I don't take any sleeping medicine because I work, when I get home, I'm physically fatigued. I take the dogs for a walk. Everyone should walk the dog whether they have one or not. 2 dogs make me do that. But the other day I do to complete my life, I start the day with prayer and Bible study. I'm very strong in my beliefs. And I really believe that the Lord has had his hand on my life because why am I still alive here at this advanced age when 95% of my medical school classes already died? Because they didn't have that epiphany I had that changed my career, saved my life, but I'm still here today and they're all gone. That's my wife of 66 years. We've been married now. And I asked her, I wonder why that my colleagues are all gone, I'm still here. And her response was, because the Lord's not through with you yet. Think that's true.
Definitely, I mean, beliefs and stuff like that, and that's really important.
It is. I've been writing articles for Franklin Graham's Decision magazine. I'm in my 5th year of writing those. And the first article I wrote was in January 2021, which entitled How God Has Had His Hand on My Life. That's been an opportunity to get my message out to another 750,000 or more people around the world through Decision magazine. All the professional articles I've been associated with, let's compare the articles I've written in Decision magazine every other month. I've done this since January 2021. I've had more responses from my Decision magazine article than I've ever had from a medical journal article. So the Lord has had his hand on my life. I wouldn't be here today, no question about that.
Well, you definitely have an interesting life, and I wanted to ask this question. You helped train the Brazil soccer team back in 1969. Can you talk about that?
That was one of the exciting parts of my life. I was still in the Air Force. This was back in 1960, and the book came out. And I was invited to speak in Fontainebleau, France, at the Congrès International Sports Militaire. These were medical officers. These were officers from throughout the world. Medical officers. In fact, I met Claudio Coutinho there, who was a physical trainer, started the physical education program for a Brazilian team located there in Rio de Janeiro. You heard me speak on the concept of aerobic conditioning and training. He thought this may be a good way to train the Brazilian team in preparation for play in Mexico City at 7,200 in 1970. So here's why Virginia came to her home in San Antonio, where I was stationed in the Air Force, and spent a couple of weeks with her. We developed a program for the Brazilian team. He went back and he had the Brazilian team, including Pelé, to do the Cooper test. That's the 12-minute test. There was 1.86 miles in 12 minutes. I made them get 100 points per week, use the point system we have in the Aerobics book, measuring by running 20 miles a week in addition to their soccer. They hated me, and I said, just a minute. One of my guidelines, you'll find number one, it will delay the onset of fatigue. It will reduce injuries. Vince Lombardi once said that fatigue makes cowards of us all. Number two, you'll play better in the second half. International soccer is 45 minutes, no rest, 30-minute rest, and that's 45 minutes. All teams go down. If you're at the top of the fitness level, you're going to be still at the top of the fitness level at the end of the hour and a half. Next, it'll prolong your professional career if you do that. So I took that 12-minute test, and I said the average 1.86 miles. I put on my guidelines, and you can go to the internet and ask what's the most famous soccer team ever to win the World Cup, the 1970 World Cup. And why? Because they were trained by the Cooper method. And Claudio Coutinho did that. And so that really established because they won 6 consecutive matches and winning every time the World Cup. It was their third World. And for those matches, they were tied. They had the other 2 matches, 1 goal ahead. And they were tied 1-1 with Italy in the finals. They won by a score of 4-1 in the finals. So I became an icon of Brazil. I've been in Brazil 21 times now. I had the privilege of running a 10K with the president of Brazil a few years ago.
That's awesome. That's amazing. That's a fun story to tell, especially when you said Pele too. I thought that was pretty cool. I told my son about this interview, and I said, "This guy will help train Pele." So it was pretty cool.
That's true. Sure, I helped them, but Pele won.
Well, another thing too is another thing I was fascinated is about you also have the training regimens from NASA, the astronauts. And how was that for you?
Well, what happened is when I transferred the Army to the Air Force, originally I was planning on going into NASA and become a scientist astronaut. And my colleague, Bill Thornton, and I wrote that. First, I've spent 2 years at Harvard, getting a master's in public health and doctorate of exercise physiology for the second year. And then, but that was to meet the requirements to get my board's aerospace medicine, to get that master's public health. That's where I ran the Boston Marathon twice. But then what happened, that working with Bill, we had 2 requirements. Number one was to develop the technology we can readable EKG on exercising subject. This is the early 1960s. What we're doing here every day, but we're 300,000 maximum performance cerebral stresses last 54 years. We didn't have the capability in that time because the only way you could monitor a heart rate on exercising subject was stand beside them on the treadmill and count their pulse for 15 seconds, multiplied by 4. Even back in those days, we have the Harvard step test. You walk up and down the step. Carry your EKGs with you. They didn't know what was happening during the exercise. Big mistake. Because what happened to those astronauts or space actually they go into cardiac arrhythmia. You wouldn't know it. You couldn't even read it. It was nothing but art of that. So we resolved that problem. Now it's ubiquitous all over the world. But the second A is in the book. We talked about the bed rest study to show that recumbent cycling could be the way to exercise in the weightlessness of space. Because if you don't do something in space, you lose your baroreceptors. That's to counteract the effect of gravity. They lose that. It's like going to bed for a day or period of hours or weeks, rather. You get up, you pass out because you lost that ability to handle gravity. So we had to do something to compensate for that. So we had these basic airmen lying flat on their back for 2 weeks. We paid them for doing it. And one half would exercise on a bicycle ergometer at the end of the bed. It's in the book. And the other group would do nothing. And then we test what's called the flat test, where they sit on a saddle. And the ones that exercised didn't have any problems. And so those who didn't exercise, they were passing out readily. And so we transferred that to the NASA program and said, you've got to do some cycling in space. So we developed that program. They're still using that. I've been asked to consult on the Mars problem. But I said, I'm too old to get involved with that. But again, that was what they started using that. So again, by doing those two things, I worked on until 1970. I said, Bill Bickman with the astronauts, with that NASA program, it's going to take a long time to get a flight into space. I could see the competition there and all. And so I decided to give it up and to leave the Air Force, leave the NASA program and all. He decided to stay with it. It took him 17 years to get his first flight into space as a scientist astronaut. Look what if I wouldn't be here today if I'd gone that route. God just had his hand on my life because I wouldn't be here for many reasons. I wouldn't be doing the point that hadn't happened. So again, it's been a very blessed life. I would say that.
Well, definitely too. And then amazing things, amazing stories and stuff. All the things you accomplish.
One other thing we had mentioned is working with the world-class athletes back before the Olympics in Montreal in 1976. That's in the book. And we had people like Steve Prefontaine and Frank Shorter, people like that. We wanted to do what the East Germans and Russians were. We wanted to see if athletes were born or made, or that happened. So we brought these 20 top athletes from around the world to come in. We did some strange things like got their muscle biopsies from their leg because we find that the Germans were doing this. They were biopsying the muscles of these young children because if these endurance athletes, they had a high percentage of slow twitch fibers, and those who were sprinters had a high bit of fast twitch fibers, entirely different muscles of the leg. And we found these distance runners had 80% slow twitch fibers. Yet there was one man in the group that had less than that. He only had 45% slow twitch fibers, but his fibers were twice the size of anybody else. So we came to the conclusion, we predicted on a 6-mile run who was going to be the top 10ers, all top 10 finishers. And it almost had practice by scientific studies on these gentlemen. We found that, but we found that the one reason that those are doing so well is they were running 100 miles a week. But then if you don't have that genetic predisposition with a lot of slow twitch fibers, 85% slow twitch fibers, if someone had 45, can be born, but it also can be made. So, but because Don Cardone was the one that had 45%, and he placed fourth in Olympic Marathon in Montreal. Frank Shorter placed second that year, and he did first in 1972. So again, we use the scientific technique to evaluate the athletes to prove, to detect how they can perform. After we did the studies and published the scientific literature, I was contracted by the horse racing industry. What if I could predict the winner of a horse by doing muscle biopsies? Got into that.
It's definitely interesting too. Because I remember a long time ago, my uncle gave me a book about running, and they said the running, how it can make you more relaxed and help you clear thoughts and stuff like that too.
That's really does, because what is good for the heart is good for the brain. No question about that. No other way we've been able to show. And finally, a group of people, 50 years of age, we've out for 25 years, got the Medicare debt for 65 to 75 years. And the only thing we looked at, did look at their cholesterol, their body weight, their blood pressure, was their time on the treadmill. Classified, age and sex adjustment, very poor, superior. Look, the top 20 percentile versus the bottom 20 percentile, 21% women. And we found the top 20 percentile had 36% less Alzheimer's dementia than the bottom category. All healthy now, remember that. Mm-hmm. They had 40% less chronic kidney disease requiring dialysis than compared to the bottom category. They had 25% reduction in all types of cancer, and they had 25% reduction in congestive heart failure. But the big thing that cost them Medicare from 65 to 75 years of age was 40% less in those the top category, fitness person, bottom category. That proves two things. You can prevent Alzheimer's dementia. What we said is cheap and more effective prevent disease and find a cure, and you can reduce the cost of healthcare. We pay over $4 trillion for healthcare. We rank 47th in longevity. We spend way too much for a health service dollar on desperate measures that prolongs death, not life and that needs to be changed. I hope this book will revolutionize the world. Where the way you can practice medicine, the way you can prolong life and enjoy quality life is I'm enjoying at the present time.
Well, the interesting thing, I was thinking about what I said in the intro and stuff is, and I think you talked about before, is your health is your responsibility. What do you think about that?
It is your responsibility. As I said before, that no drug can replicate the benefits of an active lifestyle. It's is coming out in all literature now. Just the one thing, 30 minutes of exercise. There's a saying, 30 minutes of exercise, 5 weeks of that's not recommended by the American Heart. 150 minutes per week. Recommended by the American College of Sports Medicine, 150 minutes per week. I've been saying this for years, but now people are realizing this, that the number one of the 8 different things we had to get Cooper on is to exercise. Exercise is medicine. That's why we tried to bridge that gap, as I said earlier, between faddism and scientific legitimacy, because I had to prove the value of exercise. Because exercise is dangerous. I told you exercise too much, that they would happen. I've outlived my father by 18 years because he died because he didn't exercise. And why do not people not exercise? I have an acronym, TELLM. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. I don't have the motivation. I don't have the money. I don't have the place. That's not fun. Sure, there's lots of excuses. I had that in medical school. I didn't think I need exercise for health. I exercised for competition. And that was the attitude most people had back in those days. Because exercise is something you don't do past 40 years of age. Even in medical school, we were taught you had a heart attack, that you live in a 2-story house, you must move to a 1-story house. No longer can you walk up and down the flight of stairs. You've had a heart attack. We're condemning these people to early grave. Attacks are running the marathons now. So don't give up on exercise. Exercise is not a panacea, but it's the foundation of any preventive medicine program.
I have an interesting question about the Cooper Institute. What is that? I was kind of curious.
Well, first thing, the name has been changed. It's reached out of the Kenneth Cooper Institute. We joined forces after 54 years with Texas Tech because they're providing the funding for that institute now, which they move on to their School of Public Health here in Dallas. We started that before I saw my first patient December the 6th, 1970. 6 months before I established that as a 501c3 foundation, the Cooper Institute. Because again, the book Aerobics published in 1968 was based on an Air Force population of 27,000 people, 15 exercises, 12,000 controls, but their average age was 28. So I didn't have the data I needed for older people. So I realized I had to get research data to prove what I'd said in my first book. And so now the results are just completely, totally appreciated now around the world. That's been because of the work that we've done through the Institute. I praise the Lord that we started that. I had to fund it myself for so many years. It's a very expensive operation. But then Texas Tech back in November of the last year decided to take that over, and it's now we're part of their organization, and they're funding it completely. That's your prayer for me too.
And that's really important too. And also, I was kind of curious about the message behind your book, Grow Healthy, Grow Healthier as you grow older. What are the key takeaways you would like the audience to remember?
Are you satisfied with the way you feel at the present time? Don't you wish you could feel better? Don't you would you enjoy life to fullest? Would you enjoy being more active than you're doing that? Are you sure that you have to do that because you're getting older? You don't, because look at me. We have close to 1,000 people daily will exercise here at our fitness center, one of the most premier fitness centers in the world. And we found these people, a lot of people of my age, I'm probably the oldest one exercising, but a lot right behind me, 85, 90 years of age, are out there exercising because they have enjoyed that quality of life. Just ask your question, am I feeling the best I could feel? You might be surprised to start even at your advanced stage and getting Cooperized and concentrate with 8 things I've recommended. Change your life and prolong your life and have joy, the quality of life, and square off the curve. And just go ahead and happen worldwide. At the cost of healthcare, what happened? The enjoyment of life, what would happen? If people aren't depressed anymore, all these various things, would you like to enjoy that? Just ask yourself that question.
Definitely too. I would definitely enjoy that myself too. One thing, wrapping up, one question I want to leave is, what legacy do you hope to leave behind for your all the work you've done to next generation of people in exercising?
People think I've read, published these 20 books just to make money. I've never motivated to make money, period. I don't need that. But what I'm trying to motivate people to take care of themselves. And the only reason I've written these books over the years is I base my book on current scientific research. I'll say things in my new books I've been said before. Like for years, I said, run more is better. Run 15 miles a week, you run 50 miles a week, that's even better. But now change that, because if you run more than 15 miles a week, you're running for something other than cardiovascular fitness. It may be competition. You don't earn money for that. So I had to change that book. And now, latest book, I say, if you get 30 minutes fast collective versus say, those are all changes published in a lot of publications, but primarily come from research. It's not just not me preaching this. It's other people around the world saying that. And you can't avoid it because the results are too impressive to be ignored, as I said. So I write these books, no, to make money. I care less about them. What I'm concerned about is helping people help themselves. I think that's my divine commitment, put it that way.
That's a very good one, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Cooper. Where they can connect with you, find more about you in your book?
Yes, you can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon. You get it. And most of the stores are having it now. It was released in June the 24th. It's now selling very well. Very, very pleased to see the response. But so go to the internet or go to the bookstore and you can find it. And remember, it's grow healthier as you grow older. And don't think, I don't need that. But maybe 2 or 3 years now, you may look back and say, I wish I'd bought that.
Dr. Cooper, thank you much for spending time today. I really do appreciate all links will be in the show notes for this episode. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of the No Sitting on the Sideline Dad podcast. Hey, a huge thank you to Dr. Kenneth Cooper for sharing his wisdom and providing the take charge of your health is worth every step. Before we go, here's a parting challenge for all of us. Me too. Start moving. 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. No magic pill. No perfect plan. Just consistent action. Your future self will thank you. You can find all links in the show notes and resources, full show notes for this conversation at nosittingonthesideline.com/167. Hey, I appreciate you. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take care. God bless. See ya.